Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good.
All right, let's try this, and we'll just do it in this mode. And so, like I think as I was saying, I'm a commercial photographer, and I teach photography. And for a photographer to be using AI, the one thing that struck me is that you can kind of like the images you can make in AI can kind of look, and I never understood why that was possible. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, well, what it is the AI, you're typing things into the AI, it's giving you something back, but in the end, you're choosing something. And the thing you're choosing is what's going to kind of look like your work." And so I wanted to show you some of my kind of commercial photography images here to kind of show you maybe what my style is kind of like. And then we'll look at this kind of AI project. So are you guys seeing what looks like color commercial photographs? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, great, great. And so, yeah, there was something like I very much am a people photographer, and working for the commercial world and the editorial world. And so certain kind of ways I engage with people and certain kind of qualities of light that I like to emulate. This is the stuff that kind of define my work. And so I started this project in May, and I call it a fictional narrative created with artificial intelligence. And that's the only, I mean, there's a lot of discussion right now about like, what are these images? Is it photography? How dare you call it photography? There are people are choosing sides on this. And, I guess I see it as all a little kind of silly because I feel like here I'm 56. When digital photography came out, people were saying that's not real photography and you shouldn't be doing that. And then when the iPhone came out, people were saying that's not real photography. And so I do believe in photography, there's always someone telling you no. There's always someone telling you that there's something you can't do. And so, I guess I'm viewing a lot of the things around AI image making with this in mind. But I would say myself that for when AI came out, I viewed it with fear and with kind of apathy. Like there were kind of very fantastic images that other photographers were making that kind of looked science fiction-y, and it would be like a beautiful model with a spacesuit on in France or something like that. And I would just be like, oh, what is this stupid stuff? I don't want this, and I can't relate to this. Um, but also fear, like in photography, there's been trends that photographers have been encouraged to adapt. Like at one point, we were all supposed to stop doing still photography and do video. And I remember at the time I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. Like I knew it wasn't a good fit for me, and I kind of dodged it as long as I could. But with this, I started out hating it almost more than anything. And I think out of boredom and curiosity, I just tried to make some images. And this was the first image I made. And I don't know where I got the idea, but I had the idea of a bear being a photographer, or a bear holding a camera. And, I loved it right away. And some of the things I liked about it, though, weren't obvious. Like I liked how fake it looked. And I liked these things that were supposedly cameras. They just suggested a camera. It was almost like it was like a piece of metal that had some circuit. It almost looked like if a kid made a camera out of cardboard and then painted it black, that's what it would look like a flat sheet with just a disc on the front. And I really liked those things. And, myself, I'm not into gear or anything like that. But these cameras that I saw the AI making, oh, I just liked them. They just looked curious, kind of like folk art, kind of handmade, and I just really liked them. And so there was something that was kind of curious to me about it. And I am a long time like fan of the history of photography. And has anyone been familiar with the work of Louis Hine? Does anyone know who Louis Hine is? No? Paul, do you know who Louis Hine is?
I do. He was a pioneering photographer of child labor, but a lot of other subjects. And this was at the beginning of the 20th century. And I think it has been argued by those who know that his photographs actually helped change some of the laws regarding child photography. I mean, child labor, child photography, that's still a problem.
Yeah. No, I guess my awareness of Louis Hine is he would sneak into factories and photograph these situations where children were working in the factories. And I love photographs from that era, and I love Louis Hine's photos. And I think as I'm typing things into I think I said in the two kids holding cameras in the style of Louis Hine. And then I figured out when Louis Hine was working, and I typed that date in. And this is an image I got. And, there were just things I loved about it. Like, I liked how the faces looked like they probably were pulled from Louis Hine photographs, but then I liked how the cameras just looked like they were drawn, and then the shallow depth of field and the quality of light. And it almost looked a little bit like the kids were in a factory, but you couldn't really tell. And so all of those things, I was like, oh, look, I can kind of dig into history here. And, it's funny, people are always pointing out, the things that AI creates that they think are bad. Like, oh, the hands don't look good, or things are pixelated, or those are all the things I liked about these things, because to me, in the world that I am in commercial photography, everything is perfect. And everybody's work is great. And everything is retouched to perfection. And you rarely see something like, I have a philosophy that you rarely see a bad photograph anymore. Like the gear does so much work, like iPhones take amazing photographs. And so this idea that this kind of machine could put out these kind of rough things that look like photographs, I liked, a lot. And so I kind of was just playing with this thing and riffing with this idea of a kind of camera club. And it would be a camera club in the 1940s. And that would allow me to create all these photographs made in the 1940s. And so I'm playing around to see if it could give me street scenes in the 1940s. And so, I think I was just kind of had an imagination on that day and created this idea of a camera club in the 1940s. And it was kind of telling the story of, photography becoming very popular and suddenly the masses embracing it. And, here the idea that the camera club would create a statue in the town to honor photography and have that there. And so, and then I had the idea of the founder of the camera club, and going back to where did he live? And this was like the house he grew up in because his parents were fans of photography. And I could make the house look like a camera. And so these kind of silly, kind of crazy ideas, I liked the idea that it would almost like I could write a children's book and come up with the illustrations from these things. And, I wrote a little thing here that I call the beginner's mindset. And I said, of course, I feared all that was AI. I consistently rolled my eyes at the wave of images photographers were sharing on Instagram that were truly impressive and fantastic. They were honestly breathtaking. As with everything in photography, people were taking sides and digging in. It's not real photography. I'm 55, and at this point, I've been told so many things are not real photography. All I can do is shrug. My first response was cynical. It felt as satisfying as using a slot machine, which for me is not satisfying at all. And then my second response was that it felt like a tool, not really an end result. And the results struck me as more photographic than I expected. And they also seemed to reflect my photographic style in both composition, sense of humor, and irony. And I wasn't sure why these images had all those qualities. And at first, it wasn't fun to do at all. It was more of a curiosity. And it was almost like I think I was looking for the experience of making a photograph out in the real world to be the same as using AI. And so to me, it was kind of like, well, this isn't fun or interesting at all. I don't see what to like about this. But eventually I saw, well, no, it's something different. It's not that. It's something totally different. And that's when suddenly it became fun. And then I said, then it became as inspiring as I learned to use it like any new machine in your life. You test its limits and then you find a way to make it your own. And so, this project started in May, and so right now we're almost at May again. So let's say 9 months. And so my final takeaway, is this: great things often come when you can have this beginner's mindset. You don't know how to use something. You don't care. So you just play. The sense of play is harder to tap into the more professionally you practice a craft. With AI, I was able to just play and feel that beginner's mindset again. And it gave birth to this project that we're going to look at, the AI Camera Club. And so, that feeling of being like as a commercial photographer and a person who has personal projects that have gotten various degrees of attention, it's hard to have that beginner's mindset where you're not afraid to try and you're not afraid to fail. And using AI, because it's so unprecedented for all of us, this is the time that we can use it and not really worry about like if we're doing bad at it. And so to me, that was the kind of freedom I felt here, and I think it just did allow me to kind of dig in with my imagination. And I teach at an art school. I kind of run the department with administrative things, and I teach some classes. And so by creating this idea of a camera club, I thought I could kind of copy some of the ideas of things that are happening at the art school, at the photo department. Like there could be a lighting class, there could be the different students in the class, the different camera club members here, of all different ages and all different backgrounds. We could have, the pet photography day coming into the class. We could have some of the eccentric photographers who are members of the camera club. And then I could try to imagine what their photographs could be like. And so I kind of felt like, then, oh, here's a still life photography class, And I almost felt like with this structure of creating something that I called the Camera Club, I could do so many things. Like there could be not just the people in the club, but we could look at the photos that people in the club create. Then we could also have the behind the scenes photographs of the people making photos. And so, I think for a photographer, when you're an old-fashioned photographer, a real photographer, access is everything. You need access to that world that you're trying to photograph. And I think with this, where there's no access, it's all coming from your brain, I needed something that was diverse enough that I could kind of work on it in time, with a solid amount of time. And, for me, personal projects usually take 3 years, like where I'm working on a project for 3 years to thoroughly investigate it, whether it's something that is a documentary project like Sex Machines was, or even a project that I did with my son at Galilea, that was also a 3-year project. And so I am a big believer in doing something for a long period of time. And I don't know, Paul, how long did you work on, say, meetings? Like, would it be longer than that or shorter than that? Or?
Work on what?
The project meetings that I've.
5 years.
5 years. So
5 years of photographing, but a year of research before I started photographing.
Right. And then there's the disseminating of the project and everything. But I do believe that when you can stick with something for a long time, it allows you to get into the fabric of it and explore it. And it's no longer just surface. And it also allows, in this day and age, it to gain an audience, because it's not just a one-off thing. It's something you're really doing. And so, I began making pictures in this way, all kind of set in the 1940s. And here I had the idea of like, well, what if the club did a night or a landscape photography workshop. And this is where they went off and did this. And I tried to research when McDonald's was, first started. And this would be the idea of making one of the photographs, of the McDonald's at that time on a foggy day. And and then some classic things that people would always be photographing. But to me, with this, if you're working out of your own brain with AI, you do need to be able to tap into the ideas, and you need to kind of write a script if you want it to kind of continue, or at least that's what I needed to do here. And so I tried to tap into things that were happening in, my own life at the time. Like I traveled to the East Coast of my hometown, and they had a park that kind of looked like this with the statue of an Indian. And so I tried to create photographs or AI images that would relate to that, with the idea that the Camera Club went there. I'm in San Francisco, these early pictures of the building of the Golden Gate Bridge were always fascinating. And so I wanted to set something there. And so with any project, you can hit a dead end, at times. And so trying to find a way to kind of keep these things going was always kind of interesting to me. And, to back up a little bit, as I'm making these images, I'm building the project on Instagram. And I think in the beginning, I created its own little site called the AI Camera Club. And in the beginning, nobody looked at it. I think it had some random followers that I probably poached from someone else's account, and no one liked anything. But over time, it did begin getting a following. But I very much liked using the need to fill this account as a way to build something and try to create an image every day. And, as a photographer, I'm a big believer in going out to shoot every day, and I have another project that is traditional photography that I do in San Francisco and at my school. And I try to make images every day. They're not always successful, but you're practicing, you're doing this thing. And so I wanted to approach the AI image making in the same way. And you don't always get what you want and what you're looking for, but you're getting to know the medium, and you're getting engaged with the medium. And the deeper you get into these things, the more it can kind of become your voice, and they can become your own. And so, around the holiday season, I've always been a big fan of photographing Halloween in the town that I live in. And I've done other projects around, Halloween. And, I've always liked the work of Eugene Meatyard. If anyone knows the work of Eugene Meatyard, he is a photographer who photographed children in masks. And I think he was what era was Meatyard in? Was he the 1950s, Paul?
I believe so. And he was the guy, he was an optometrist in Kentucky.
Yeah, he was an optometrist. Photography was his hobby, but a very serious hobby. And he liked to kind of stage photographs, They always had a little kind of sense of theatricality. And so I think a lot of my photographs I've always liked his work. And then a lot of the images in this project kind of seem a little inspired by Meatyard's photographs, around the Halloween time.
Do you use Meatyard in your prompts ever?
No. And I don't know if he's popular enough. In trying to get the look and feel for these images, I tried different image generators, but these used DALL-E. And a lot of it just came down to what gave me the look I was looking for, like what gave me that kind of tintype kind of look. And very rarely did the prompt know if I put a photographer's name in. But the one photographer there's two that were able to emulate. And one was Eugene Ajay, if you know Ajay. And then the other is E.J. Bellick. Do you think your students know who E.J. Bellick is?
Thinking that my students probably haven't had a whole lot of photo history, so I'm thinking that. But prove me wrong. There was even a movie about E.J. Belloc. Who was the actor in that movie, Timothy? You remember?
I didn't know that there was a movie about E.J. Belloc. There's a movie about Ouija. No, I didn't know there was an E.J. Belloc movie.
Well, it took place I think in New Orleans whorehouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all you
And
can.
so yeah, E.J. Belloc was I think he may have had a physical handicap, and he photographed prostitutes in brothels in New Orleans. And his photographs are amazing and beautiful. His work was discovered by Lee Friedlander.
Yeah.
And so I had the idea, I would create, E.J. Belloc was an influence of these Halloween era photographs. Also, Robert Disfarmer, if anyone knows the work of Robert Disfarmer, photographing in Heber Springs, Arkansas. And so I tried to, reference a lot of these photographers in the kind of writing of this. Not that anyone would need to know this. I don't think anyone is as big of a photo nerd as I am, but it allowed me to kind of have a script that I would follow, and so a lot of these Halloween photographs, I said that they were taken by a photographer named Eugene Farmer, which was a combination of those names that I created. This was Farmer here in a self-portrait in his studio. And, I had him as this photographer in Oil City, Pennsylvania, who photographed people in costume. He photographed a camera club costume contest where the members dressed up like cameras. A parade where members dressed up like cameras. This is one that took place in New York City. And so, I think to me, it was like I liked the idea of creating these fictional narratives that then I could create the images for. And there's probably things that are fueling me in these things that I like, but in the end, I just thought the images were kind of fascinating, and they did have this kind of graphic quality that my own photographs kind of had. I've always been a fan of the 18-foot skeleton, which is sold at Home Depot. And I wanted to get that in here. I don't think they really made that in the 1940s. And so, there's a lot of things that are happening in the history of photography that are that to me are fascinating, and they seem almost too good to be true. Like the whole Vivian Mayer story. And Paul, do you think your students know who Vivian Mayer is?
I don't.
Yes.
Some of them do, yeah.
And so
I
he had that idea that an archive of this photographer was found later after her death, and she was reclusive, but she did self-portraits in mirrors on the streets of, Chicago. Like these stories seem like fiction almost, but they almost seem, we welcome them, and they're not fiction, they're real. But the idea that like I wanted this series of photographs to feel like an archive of a camera club that, oh, we didn't know existed, but look at how fascinating their photographs are. And so, like, there's a lot of things that were happening in real life that I felt like I could kind of create or recreate here, kind of in the storyline of, this series. And then of course, after Halloween is Thanksgiving. And when I think of Thanksgiving, I think of the Macy's parade. And, I like the idea of like, oh, okay, this camera club, they were trying to promote themselves. So what would they do? Oh, they tried to make a float to be in the Macy's parade that would promote their camera club. So it would be like a guy with a camera. Oh, this one didn't really work out. It never left the parking lot. But then the next year they had a successful one in the Macy's parade. And so I think that I'm using these little stories in my head to kind of give me a path to follow in making the images. And so, there was this kind of thing where, I think with any project, you're moving through it and you're trying to kind of figure out what you can do with the medium and where it can go. And these beginning steps in the project, I liked them, but I felt like, I thought I hit a stride over the last couple months, which is the last little chapter of this project. And the I think with anything you can hit a wall or you can run out of ideas. But I am a big believer with any kind of project, you have to keep working. And I'm not afraid to do bad things, bad images. I'm not afraid to do something and then totally like delete it because I don't like it anymore. But I do think as you're chipping away at something, you kind of find the voice of the project. And the one thing with AI is like this has all been since May. And say if this was a traditional photography thing, I don't think I could create and get into a project and then dismiss things and embrace things as quickly as I was able to do with this project. Like the AI allows you to kind of get in and figure out what you're trying to do and figure out how to get what you're looking for. And the turnaround time and the feedback loop is obviously faster for all the obvious reasons. So inspired by the photographs from the Farm Security Administration, this series referenced the work of Dorothea Lange, Walker Evans, and Russell Lee. And these are photographers that you could easily Google if you're not familiar with them, but they worked during the Depression, documenting the Depression. And I viewed this as, to tie this in with the Camera Club, I viewed this as, the Camera Club was trying to expand and they had a high school photography workshop in Winslow, Arizona. And this is where they taught high school kids how to do photography. And there's a couple kind of fantasy ideas I'm playing with here. It is that the founder of the club kind of created these multi-lens cameras that opened up the space, and the students were using those cameras. It allowed them to shoot car interiors and do portraits in there to expand it. And so, there's a lot of little kind of stories. And I guess you're probably wondering, like, well, where are these stories? And I think it's, as I was building this on Instagram, there would be a kind of storyline that the images would have these kind of captions with. And, it's almost like here, Instagram is such a part of people's lives now. The idea that you're building a project on it that almost exists better on Instagram than it does like elsewhere. Oh, it's kind of curious, or it's just kind of interesting. But this was created kind of with that in mind. But it is interesting to see the images big now. But let's take a look at these. And, at around the time that I was creating these images here, which is the past couple months, there is an online photo kind of forum began sharing the work that I was doing. And it was interesting because I kind of never really shared it. I just shared it on Instagram and I didn't open it up to the public to see what they kind of thought. And originally the work was received with, I would say, 90% negativity, like pure negativity, bile, hatred. This is theft, vomiting emojis, the emoji of someone green vomiting, those were the response to the images. And, as a photographer, you do need to have a thick skin, and, as Paul was saying, earlier projects of mine, everyone has been met with scorn, really, And so, I don't try to, I don't nurture those things, but I'm used to that, And so it's interesting, with to me as the project was kind of finding its legs, it suddenly was becoming public and was becoming definitely there are people who hate anything that's AI and view it as a threat to traditional photography. And I can't argue that it's not really, and it is going to impact my life as well as a commercial photographer. There's going to be things that you could just do with AI that I used to be hired to do, but I don't think I can stop that, But it's interesting, as we look at this section of images, I start to think of this is suddenly where they became public and people were disliking them, or disliking the idea that I was creating them. So the little kind of narrative here is there was a workshop out in Winslow, Arizona, to teach high school kids photography. And I wanted a lot of the images to be in a car. And so there was the idea that the founder of the club had a wrecked car that was broken and they could use as a prop in a lot of these images. And so that was a little bit of the storyline here. But because you'll see, I wanted to create a series of images that were all done within a car. I thought it gave it interesting context, and I like the interiors of cars from the 40s, and I felt they were bigger and you could have more space in them. So yeah, I think some of it is I always wished I could photograph one of those things. And this is one of the cameras that they created that had these multi-lens kind of surfaces that allowed the viewpoint of the camera to expand and to open up. One of the students. This is testing also one of the cameras, one of the new cameras.
There's a photograph of a photographer. It wasn't Bresson, but that had an old Leica that had a viewfinder on top in front of his face. Previous one is very referential to it. And
Oh, no, I do know what you're referring to. Yeah, right. Where it kind of became part of his face.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, I would say that, okay, we look at this and it's absurd, but I think as the AI was getting better and making these images seem a little more realistic, I think I wanted to give the viewer a hint that this wasn't real and that there was an element of fantasy here. And that it wasn't like we were just trying to recreate journalism. And so I wanted to begin introducing this element. And, like a lot of things, I think when you're making it, there's other tangents that I introduced in the project that I didn't share here that I subsequently removed from the project. So with anything, there's trial and error. You do things. Like in the very beginning of the project, the camera club had discovered an iPhone and we're trying to figure out how to put a lens on an iPhone. And so of course that couldn't happen because the camera club was in the 40s and the iPhone came out in the 2000 somethings. But I wanted this element of maybe science fiction in there. And subsequently, I never could go anywhere with that kind of storyline, but I think that evolved into this. And if I'm confusing anyone, feel free to ask questions. I realize I'm probably closer to the project than anyone else is. Yeah, and I think, in my head, I love the idea of shooting inside these cars. And yeah, the idea was those multi-lens cameras would allow the students to kind of do this and open up this space. Because honestly, as someone who has looked at photographs from this era, I've never seen this viewpoint. I've never seen Dorothea Lange photograph inside a car like this. And so there is an element of me kind of greedily using the AI to see things, I always wanted to see, but, could never really see. In some of these images that came about, I really just thought they were beautiful. I think this is a beautiful composition, and the clothing and the elements, the details, it's not detailed in the way a photo would be. That a lot of it is broken up into pixels, but the spacing of everything, I just really thought was beautiful.
Timothy, I don't know if you remember,
Yeah.
but on the next one, can you share roughly what the prompt would have been for that?
I could make it up. I don't have a record of it, but
Right.
yeah,
What typically would it be?
Yeah, no, I would say, let me just say, I would say Dust Bowl era, 1945, Dust Bowl era, farmer woman, middle class, view through the windshield from the back seat, people in the background, overcast day, kind. And so I think it would be like that. And so it wouldn't be, I think I found, or in dirt road. And so I think if I said like Dust Bowl era, dirt road, it would always give us something like this. And then I would need to address the wardrobe, and I would need to address the look on the face. And I think if you look at like my photographs, my actual photographs, the way the main woman is looking into the camera here is something I like out of my photographs. Like I like that kind of half smile, Mona Lisa smile type of thing. Like I don't like something to look too stern, but I don't like them to be smiling for the camera necessarily. And so this composition and the way even the woman on the left is kind of curiously looking back at the photographer, those are things I like in my own images. And so I think I've learned how to kind of use the AI to dial that expression in or dial it down, you know. And I realize if I don't put something in to address it, it ends up being, it's immediately, they give me something that looks a little more commercial, more like smiley or something like that, you know. And so I do remember when I was making this image, originally I said I wanted the idea that the camera club hired a model and took a model out here to photograph them, but a, you know, a model from the 1940s. And so I had some, it was giving me someone who was kind of dressed in maybe what you would think a model would wear at the time. And I think I had her smoking a cigarette or something like that. And it was like, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't make sense, you know. But it was interesting. I could type in, you know, 1945 model, and it would give me something that kind of looked very elegant. And then I could type in 1945 amateur model, and it would give us closer to what I was looking for, which was like just like someone's mom who dressed up like a model, you know. So it knew the difference. And I think here I tried to make it like, you know, middle class farmer housewife or something like that, you know. Does that answer your questions?
Absolutely, thank you.
You know, I don't know if like, does someone teach you how to write prompts? You know, like I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. I think people just do. I don't know. Is there any like, do you teach how to write prompts?
Goodness, no, but I think some of the students here have a lot more experience with AI than I do. I mean, I have used it. Anybody ever come across a tutorial or anything?
No, but I have a process that like I've had to develop because it's so new. So like the idea of super prompts,
Yeah.
where you create a very detailed, developed prompt over multiple iterations.
Yeah.
And that's something that you really like. And then you can change key parts of that super prompt to get different results.
Oh, that's very much the way I work here is like, yeah, refining a prompt back and forth with the machine to get, you know, not exactly what you're looking for, but as close to what you're looking for as possible. And sometimes it works. Sometimes, yeah, you realize if you change a word, it changes a little bit, then it can maybe, it works. Like this morning in preparation for this talk, I wanted to create an image that was of a machine that was half computer and half keyboard. And I wanted to pretend that it was that I was giving a talk and I was going to tell everyone that this is the machine that made these images. Where you would type, you know, it was a 1940s machine that you would type in and then somehow it would combine, make a photograph of what you typed in or something like that. And so I was trying to create this, and I found that it was very hard to get the AI to make a machine that looked what I wanted it to look like. But once I got it, it consistently delivered something that looked like this. And but then I could do it in different places. Like I started out saying that, this machine was going to be at a diner with a pen. And then I didn't like what that looked like. And then I wanted one in a barn. And then I didn't like what that looked like. And then I wanted one in the window of a camera store. And then I wasn't crazy about that one yet either. And then I landed on this one, but I was able to go back and forth. Once I realized what prompts would give me a machine that looked like this, I could play around with what scenario that would be, and then this seemed to fit closer in with this project. Let's go back to that, where we were here. And so, throughout this, as I'm making these images over the past couple months, this is when the project did, I think I was able to really sense the fear and the fear and hatred that people had for people using AI, for AI, for the theft and the copyright infringements of AI. And, people would pose questions to me in an online forum to be like, as a commercial photographer, how are you reconciling the idea that you are using trademark stolen images to create the images for your project? And so, I didn't have answers for these things, but I liked the idea that, I wanted to weave into this project the idea that this thing is coming, and this thing is AI, and there is not a way for us to avoid this, and to me it was always like there was a movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, from a million years ago, where there was a scene where the character was being chased by a giant boulder that was going through a cave or something like that. And I really started to view AI as this big thing. And here at the school I work at, we're teaching it, and I was a big advocate for us to begin teaching a section on this. And then there's always the question of, well, how does it work? And no one could ever answer it. Like I don't know how this thing works. Like, is it Satan that is making this thing? And like, is it the devil? I don't know. And how it's able to render the light all accurately and just in 6 seconds, and where is it getting these images from, and all of these things. Like, this is an unknown, and I'm excited to be in it and to be playing with it, but there is a weird mystery to this thing, but I wanted to weave into the series the idea that this big boulder started destroying things, and all we could do was witness it. And so here I wanted this kind of camera store that got hit by the boulder. Everyone knew that the giant rock in the hill would come rolling down one day. And that was the caption to this photograph. And then I didn't want to hit it over and over, but I started to weave it into these images, and, here were some of the instructors at the high school workshop. And then there was like family photography day here, where the students would be photographing in this barn. And, I wanted this barn that we're seeing in here to be kind of, a character in this series, where it was like, it doesn't look the same all the time, but it's this idea that, the workshop was in this barn, and then students could learn how to use the barn as a studio. And I wanted to set that up for reasons that it gave me something to photograph, but then I wanted AI to destroy the barn, in the end, and so eventually these images start to surface here. It says, when the giant boulder rolled down from the adjacent hilltop and landed on the barn, no one really knew what to say. The visual splendor of a massive rock formation destroying the barn had to be photographed by the students, by the instructors, everyone really. There was a thrill in being able to make some breathtaking images, but everybody knew it was the end of something. And this really was the image I wanted to make, which was this idea of, this boulder that came crushing in and was larger than anything anyone had ever seen and destroyed everything in its path. But of course, we had to photograph it. We had to make photographs of that thing. And, I think, many of you probably weren't alive during 9/11, but, with 9/11, there was this, the phenomena of a plane hitting a building. It was like the movie Die Hard or something. And it was this, saddest moment in the history of America, but also there was like a spectacle there. And, I feel like these things happen in our culture time and time again. That the thing that's destroying us also we're seduced by it and we're taken in by it, you know. Um, and so here I kind of wanted to portray the barn, and it had been hit by the rock, and it was still standing, but it was ready to go down. The first time the barn was hit by the boulder, it did some damage. When the second boulder rolled into the barn, everyone knew it was over. And, I think it's not like this was the last image in the project, but I wanted to give us this. I wanted to acknowledge this, like the destruction. And I think it's the destruction either that I feel like people are envisioning AI bringing to us, or it is the destruction. It's funny. I saw a photographer give a talk, Philip Lorca de Corsia, who is a kind of renowned fine art and fashion photographer. And he gave a talk, it was probably 10 years ago. And I remember he said, we can all acknowledge that when digital came, something died. There's something we don't have anymore when digital took over. He's like, I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but something ended there. And I thought that was well stated, And I kind of feel like that with AI. Like something's over now. I don't know what it is. Is it truth that's over? Is it the idea that we can believe what we see is over? But something's over now, or something is just beginning. And so, I mean, I'm an optimist by nature. I'm surrounded by pessimists, but I do think that acknowledging, like Philip did there, that no, this is a chapter and something shifted here. I think we need to kind of acknowledge that, And then the last image here, it's the author, who is me, taking a break from writing AI prompts as the story comes to an end. And that's me. And so that's it. That is it. We can stop sharing.
Wow.
And so definitely open to questions. And we can take anything.
Something to say or ask. So let's I'm gonna let you actually see us.
Yeah.
I think something that kind of struck me as I was seeing these visuals that weren't one-offs, but were a part of a continuous series, was wondering, like, what is the difference between this and a novel? Like, it almost feels like a novel, but generated with images, and that's a really strange concept.
Well, it's interesting. It's not, I appreciate, that's an excellent insight. I would say it's not that strange because there are, like, I am a big fan of graphic novels. Like, do you know what a graphic novel is? There is Charles Burns is someone who made some really amazing, like an amazing series called Black Hole. Charles Burns is an illustrator. He did graphic novels and a comic strip. And his work was very kind of black and white and expressionistic, and it was kind of retro. And I didn't put two and two together until you mentioned that, but I always loved his work. And I loved how he made these images. And then there was a narrative that it wasn't as hefty as a novel where you're really getting entrenched in it, but it was like words and images woven together. And then here is the thing. And so, I would say the graphic novel is an influence for sure, and that's probably the the baby of something like this, before AI, allowed it to happen.
I got a question.
Yeah.
How do you keep the aesthetic for the style and colors so it's consistent over like all the photos?
Oh, okay. No. That's a good question. And when we were talking about the prompts, I left out what probably was the most important one, was that everything, the two things that I think defined the look and feel of those images are the prompt that sets the date, which is, I typically set it to 1945, but then also I say damaged tintype.
Hmm.
Do you know what a tintype is?
Oh,
Tintype is like no, not everybody knows what, kind of like a wet plate process, antiquated process of photography. And so that look and feel, like an actual tintype is much more rough looking than this, but it gave me, every prompt has that, which has given everything this kind of similar look and feel. So I think setting a date and then setting the kind of process in the same way that, if you were to shoot in photography, if you wanted to shoot everything with the medium format camera with Tri-X medium format film in it, it would give everything that look. And so, I'm using photographic prompts to set the look and feel for that. Now, I would say with the generator I'm using, they do adjust, everyone has a little different color, and then I am using Photoshop to then adjust the color. And usually what it gives me is a very saturated orangey type of thing, and I'm trying to pull it back. But when you look at the Instagram account, I'm just looking at it now, they're all a little different. Like they're not super consistent. I mean, I don't know if you can like see it, but it's like they all have little subtle differences in tone. They all look like they're antiqued, but they're not identical. Does that help?
yeah.
I have a question also.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning, you were talking about how, like, in the generation of the photo, specifically talking, or the photo of, that was about, like child labor.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it was like a way for you to see history.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me because it's not, it's the idea of history. It's like a computer algorithmic generation of like a concept and not reality.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting to me to like, to hear you say that and then also to have a response to what I just said.
Oh yeah. Let's see. The here, I just lost Zoom here. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what I see? I don't know how AI works, so I don't know. But the way I got into the 1940 type thing is I wanted to see what my my hometown of Schenectady, New York looked like in 1940. And so typed that in, and it looked like it. Like the image it gave me looked like it. And so I think again, I don't know, but I think it is pulling from historical photographs to create these things.
It's pulling from them, but you have no idea like which ones specifically or who took them. Like, I don't know. I just think that there's like so much lost in this amalgamation of all of these pictures together. Like, I think that it would be considered looking back in history if it gave you the metadata of like all the photos that it was using or like that kind of information, but because you don't have that, it's
Right.
just concept rather than like reality.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, you have to acknowledge it's fiction, and so it probably, like if a movie tried to recreate 1945 factory or something, well, it would just be a recreation of that, based on some form of history. So, no, I mean, I think there is that argument that people are like, well, wait a minute, now no one's going to know what's historical and what's not. And you, Timothy, are making these images that look like they were done in the 19 whatever, the Dust Bowl era, but they're not. And then you're confusing history. That's going to be something people are going to have to reckon with. You know what I mean? Like I don't have the answer to that. I guess to me, maybe it's like, well, is it like a painting? But then it looks awful real. I don't know. So your points are super valid. I don't have the resolve there.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna throw another thing into this and just suggest that the way history is told has never been true in any way. You know, it's depends on who's telling the history, you know, who's in a position of power to tell the history. So, and photographs. I mean, this is something, Timothy, that's sort of, you know, we've talked about basically from the very beginning of, you know, chemical-based analog photography. It has been used to lie and mislead. So. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, yeah, right. Maybe we used to have a false impression of how factual photos were, maybe, you know. Yeah, maybe they never were. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But this definitely confuses it to a whole new, you know, level. No, excellent question though, or in observation. Yeah.
What makes you decide like what crop of the format, like how you crop your images? Like why are they not like all squares?
Oh, you know, that's what the generator that I'm using, that's what it gives me. And so I just accept that, you know, and then kind of I think some of them have slight crops and then I do clean up some of the tintype damage that I don't like in it. So there's small adjustments that are made in that sense, you know, but I try to, you know, I like squares. I was always a square shooter. And so when I saw that it was giving me squares, I was like, oh, okay, I like that. Let me just go with that. So not a lot of thought into that, more just like it felt right.
I was just wondering how what the research, was like, especially coming from being kind of like, not quite cynical, but not exactly caring about the AI. But, like you said in your first, slide, that you were a bit like cynical about it, and I was just wondering how that research process was like.
Oh, so I'd love to answer your question. Just because you're far away from the mic, it got a little muffled. Could someone just clarify what that was?
But, okay, actually, why don't you come up closer, you might clarify yourself. Yeah.
I was just saying, what was your research process like, especially coming from a more cynical viewpoint, like you said before?
Mm, rephrase that. I guess like my research process in terms of trying to set things in the 1940s or in terms of using AI or like what aspect?
Well, for the projects, just how did you research and get into how you created, how you got your prompts to work and like just, you know, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It was really trial and error. You know, it was pure trial and error. And then like I had tried Midjourney and then I had tried DALL-E. And Midjourney, you could make bigger files and everything, but I could never get that look that I wanted. Where with DALL-E, I was able to pretty much hit it, that look that you saw in the whole project by doing damaged tintype 1945. I think those were the two like aesthetic kind of settings that gave me what I was looking for. And so, you know, and then I've often wondered, oh, what changed something that suddenly reads my prompts differently? Then how do I recreate that? And I mean, that's what you get when you're relying on some third party to kind of create your project, you know. But yeah, it was simply trial and error, you know. And I do think that like here at my school, we teach a class in it now. I know I liked the idea that I had no idea how to do it. And so you know, different technologies for me have never come easy. Like Twitter, I could never figure out how to tweet and what that was, and hashtag and all of those things. Like I was just like, what is this? And so I'm definitely, you know, I'm not like a guy who's always into the new technology. But this thing, I think through trial and error and just trying to navigate, I liked the experience of failing, trying again, failing. But then when you get something, then you're like, ooh, that worked. Let's try that again, you know. Excuse me. And I am a big believer, like I think in photography, any of our photo projects,
Timothy, you're breaking up.
and I think by we, I mean me. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, but it's getting choppy.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll try to continue.
Yeah.
I do feel that when you pursue a project, usually you like come upon an image by accident and then try to chase that image to try to figure out how to get it again. And to me, that's what I do in photography. And I think that using the AI was a similar type of thing where it was trial and error. And then I was like, ooh, that worked. Let's try that again. You know? Yeah.
For folks we haven't heard from yet, so we heard from you yet, Isaac?
Question, please.
What's that?
Not a question.
Yeah, that.
So I'm curious, I heard you mention at the beginning, like calling them photographs and like photography. So our debate is gonna be whether like this is photography, I think is part of the debate of the readings. And why do you categorize this as photography and not graphic design?
Oh, I think it was just like a habit, you know, like no, I don't think it's photography. It doesn't feel like photography to make it. I think I'm a photographer, so this multimedia product that is coming out of the AI feels like a photograph and feels like one of my photographs, but no, they shouldn't be called photographs. I mean, it's interesting. People love to put energy into the semantics of this stuff. Like, I can't believe you're calling it a photograph. You know what I mean? Not you, but I mean like in like internet forums where I'm always kind of like, well, just call it whatever. I don't care. I just want to make the next thing, you know. But yeah, I think it is. Yeah, you shouldn't call it photography. Call it something else.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So I mainly want to learn about like perspective and kind of camera angles. I know you played with that a little bit with the kind of the image shot inside the car, but can you elaborate on your experience or your insights or findings with perspective?
Uh, I guess Paul, could you repeat that just close to the microphone and then I can clarify?
He's asking about how you manage perspective. I'm guessing you mean through prompts and so on. And he was referring specifically to the pictures inside the car.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's all through prompts, and it took me a while to get what I was looking for. But, you know, to get that, I think I was saying view from the back seat looking out the windshield. View from the back seat looking out the passenger side window. Like I would try to define where we're viewing from, and it seemed like it would then create that. And so there's a lot of them, like there's a picture of a woman holding a baby and she's in like the front of a car, but if you really look at it, it's not really the front of a car. It's kind of like there's no steering wheel or anything like that. It's just like a big windshield and a back seat. And so like it seems like the AI creates something that's not always exactly what it would really be, but gives you what you're looking for. You know, like if we were to revisit the pictures I did that are all in cars, I think you'd realize that they're not really, there's a lot of mistakes in them in terms of like where a steering wheel would be and how big a steering wheel would be, or if there even is one, if it's looking through a windshield. And so, you know, it seems like the AI was able to kind of create things that looked and felt like you were in a car, but if you really like tried to pick it apart, you'd realize it was a fiction fabrication, you know? Yeah, question.
But I'd like everybody to have a chance to ask. Sorry, we'll get back. Okay. So I think we haven't heard from Maggie or Grace.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, awesome. You talked a little bit about experimenting with Midjourney, but liking the results from DALL-E. And I generate images that are really like aesthetically similar to the ones that you showed in this project. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on some of the things you like about DALL-E.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it really came down to that look that I'm looking for, that the whole project had. I could get with Dolly, and I couldn't get it with Midjourney. Like maybe now with more experience, I would understand how to get it with Midjourney. Like the other day, a client approached me to see if I could create a portrait of Abraham Lincoln that looked like the work I've done for that we all just looked at. And Dali couldn't do it because it wouldn't create a known person. Like it had a block on that. But Midjourney would create like Abraham Lincoln. And so I was able to use Midjourney to create this kind of portrait of Abraham Lincoln in the setting of one of these other photos, like in a barn. And it looked good and it was close, but it didn't give me that exact tintype look that this project had, you know? And so consistency was a big thing for me with this project. Like I felt like I needed that consistent look for it to be mine and for it to hold together. And so once I started, there was no wavering, you know, like I would rather have the low quality Dali image than the maybe higher quality and more control Midjourney image just for the consistency, you know? And then we printed these images and 22 by 22 and fairly early on in the project. And someone I work with at school made me 3 prints. And I was like, oh my God, they're beautiful. And I think it did make me think of it a little differently because, and it wasn't beautiful in the way a still photo is. It was beautiful in various ways. Like part areas were total pixelated, almost like a Minecraft video game where it was so primitive. And then other areas were textured and detailed. And then it was obviously blown up too big. And I like seeing the imperfections of early AI because I feel like once something gets perfect, it's not interesting anymore, you know, and it's almost perfect now, you know what I mean? Like these days. And so, yeah, I'm eager to, I almost like when you see prints of the work, you see how unperfect it is. And I think those things are reassuring to see, you know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for your like original ideation for an image, like, I don't know, for the woman and baby in the car or something like that, do you picture in your head first what you want, or do you kind of sketch and write stuff out? Or do you just go right to the AI and kind of just, I don't know, ideate there, I guess?
Yeah, you know, no, that's an excellent question. I mean, a variety of things. Like if we go back earlier in the project, say when I was shooting during, or when we were making the Halloween images, like I remember there was a weekend that my girlfriend and I took our dog to a dog costume contest. And the dog was dressed up like Taylor Swift. Our dog was. And we won second prize. And so I got home and I was like, oh, imagine if we went to, if, you know, what's a dog costume contest like in 1945? Let's make some images. Oh, let's do it on a rainy day when the dogs are filthy. Oh, okay, let's do this. And so I'm using real things in my life to inspire these ideas, you know, and then in the beginning of the project, working at an art school, you know, I taught a lighting class. And so I had done a whole series of these AI camera club images in a primitive lighting class that would take place in a big warehouse. And so I try to tap into things, you know, like that are happening, you know. You know, I knew I'd be talking to you guys today, so I wanted to create a fiction about how the images were made and came up with that idea of a thing that was half camera and half keyboard, and that's how these images were made. So I like to just try to tap into what's going on, you know. But I did with that stuff that's like the, you know, in the barn and the workshop with the big rock and those kids with the cameras, you know, those are very much inspired by, like, say, the work of Dorothea Lange, Walker Evans, the photographers working for the Farm Security Administration project. And if you do a quick Google search, you'll see those images, you know. And so there were a couple times I went back and tried to see what those photographers were photographing, and I didn't include it in this series. It's on the Instagram account, but I didn't include it in this presentation. I remember looking up and there was families, like a mom, a dad, and 3 kids in a cabin, and Walker Evans had done the photos, and the family had newspapers all taped to the wall, almost as a form of wallpaper. And so I was like, ooh, that would look good. Let's see if I can include that in some of these images, And so I am trying to pull from things that I've seen in history that were done to try to give them some of that authenticity, But of course, there was no camera club teaching kids photography in 1945, I mean, maybe there was, but it didn't look like that, and that type of thing. But yeah, in my head, I mean, I am someone who I'm traditionally a photographer who reacts to the world, though. Like, I don't do a lot of things that just come from my imagination. And so, and it was interesting, the early AI images I saw other artists do were all fantasy, like a warrior on a mountaintop slaying a dragon, and then like lasers coming down and stuff like that. And that wouldn't be my way of doing something, but I think with the technology that can give you anything, it would be tempting. But yeah, I think I wanted mine to look real, and then kind of, and I could pull from my real life to fill it or something like that,
Hallie,
Yes, so,
speak up, please.
can you hear me okay?
I can. Where are you? I don't see you.
Here.
Oh, okay. Yep. Hey.
Okay, so you talked about how much AI has changed since May. What photographs what images took you the longest to get right? And within Dolly, what prompts took you the longest to revise so it could make you the image that you wanted?
Oh, that's a good question. There was a lot of the images of the giant boulder destroying things. Like, there were 3 images in the show. One was a boulder destroying a camera store. The other was a boulder that had like fallen through a barn and torn open the inside. And then the third one was a giant boulder that had totally crushed a barn. And so those 3 were the hardest to get. I could never get the right amount of destruction that looked believable. And I think there was various, like, either the rock wasn't big enough or the rock wasn't leaving a hole in the ceiling enough to make it look like it happened. And I realized even the image that I showed here today of you're in the barn, a rock has fallen, a giant boulder has fallen through the ceiling and people are photographing it. That one was an early version that wasn't retouched because eventually I had to open up the hole in the ceiling in Photoshop, make it seem like a rock that size could have fallen through. So those destruction images were the hardest to do, or to get what I wanted out of it. It was never the barn was never destroyed enough, and then the rock was never big enough to really do what you thought it could do. And so those were the challenges with that. That is a good question, though. What it seems to me is it almost feels like lock picking, where you're trying to pick a lock, it doesn't work, or you're trying to guess a password, it doesn't work. You're trying to guess a password again, that one doesn't work. Then you guess that password and boom, you're in. And like in creating the thing I did this morning, which was like a half camera and half typewriter, yeah, there was a lot of iterations trying to get it to look like something that made sense to me, or that looked like you could actually make it or have it. And eventually it was the simplest prompt that worked. And I could probably tell you what that is because I just did it this morning. It says 1945, old camera with a typewriter keyboard built into it, held in the hands of a working class teenager against a barn wall, small town, dust bowl, natural light, damaged tintype. And so it was old camera with a typewriter keyboard built onto it. That was the thing that gave me the look and feel I was looking for. So trial and error, and then fine tuning what you're doing, you know.
I think, Grace, did you have a question? Okay, well, everybody's asked a question. I'm gonna move back here, so. Anyway, I think we're gonna, move ahead with kind of a broader discussion, but first of all, I just want to thank you, Timothy, for your wisdom, for your work, and also the tremendous effort you have put into, presenting to our class today.
You're welcome.
And just a quick business question. There was a lot of interest in this discussion on social media because Timothy posted that he was going to be doing this in the class, and there were a lot of people said, "Ooh, can we join the Zoom? Can we come in?" And I sort of thought, well, I have to ask everybody in the class. We're going to do it live, not this time. But we did record this, and I just want to see if you're comfortable with having the question and answer part that we just did now disseminate. Does anybody have any? Okay, so that's big thumbs up for that, Timothy.
I was thinking we should sell it as a master class. You know, we could make money selling it on the side. Yeah.
What's our cut out of it though?
Yeah, the talent wants to know.
We need to pay everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, but what's the currency? We're not talking about any of this crypto bullshit.
Yeah. That's the only thing people are willing to pay, I think.
Yeah, so I think what I'd like to do is I'm gonna stop recording, but then I'm gonna post the kind of the list of questions on the shared screen. And if you can stay, that would be wonderful. We would love to hear your input here. So let's see, recording, stop, boom. All right.